Hey there, everyone. Mr. Lewis here to kick off Unit 5 of AP Micro with you today. And Unit 5 is titled Factor Markets. And a factor market is simply a marketplace in which a firm or a company is purchasing a factor of production. So, the three categories of factors of production that we talked about at the beginning of the semester are land, labor, and capital. Well, usually that middle one, labor, is how we discuss factor markets. They're sometimes referred to as labor markets. And so instead of a price in the market, there's a wage, right? Or if we're talking about, say, capital, there can be just a going price for that thing. But the key to understanding factor markets is getting it in your head that firms, instead of being the producer, in these markets are actually the consumers, right? They're the ones that have to go out and buy something in the market. And the fact is, if they need a particular type of labor that only a few people can provide, then those workers, those people who have that skill set that those firms need, can charge really, really high rates for their skills, for their service. Or, in other words, they can demand a very high wage, right? So this is just like we've discussed other markets. It's all about supply and demand. And there are only two types of markets in factor markets as opposed to the four different types of product markets that we saw. There are only two different types of factor markets we'll discuss, and they're really based on supply and demand. But before we can dive into those things, today is just a basic introduction to the variables that we use within factor markets. And I've got these up here on this chart. So what I'm going to ask you to do today is to go through this chart with me. All right, take some notes if you need to. And then in Buzz today, there is a 3-level level up challenge to go with this intro section to Unit 5. Those 3 levels are actually based on these 3 variables that you see written here. MP, which is marginal product, is level 1. MRP, which is marginal revenue product, is level 2. And then MFC is marginal factor cost, and that's level 3. And I hope immediately what you see is this is not much different than what we've seen in the past. Okay, we've actually already talked about marginal product in the past, but marginal revenue product and marginal factor cost are really just our cost benefit tools here, right? In every unit we've gone through, there's always a way to measure benefit, and particularly marginal benefit, and there's always a way to measure cost. And the trick is just finding where those two things meet and not doing any activity to a point where the marginal cost of that activity is greater than the marginal benefit. So in a factor market, we want to be hiring people for less than what they're bringing us as a company, right? If we're hiring someone for, this $100,000 a year salary and they're not really generating any productivity for us, or at least not enough to warrant that salary, then we're doing something wrong as a firm. So we have to look at these variables to know how many people to hire in the case of a labor market, or in other cases, how much capital to acquire, or things of that nature. So we're going to start with this basic chart as an introduction to this stuff today. Here's what we got. There are a number of laborers being hired in the market. Okay, we've got 0, 1, 2, 3. As we hire each unit of labor, they cost us a certain amount, right? So the going wage is $5 in this particular market. And that could be, per hour, whatever. You don't really need to worry about that. We just know that each additional unit of labor is going to cost an extra $5 here, okay? With each worker, they add to our overall quantity of our good that we're producing. The good that we're making and selling in the market is going for a market price of $1. Okay, so keep both of those things in mind as we fill in this chart. Let's talk about marginal product first. Marginal product is simply the added number of units produced with each additional unit of labor. So when I hire a worker, how many extra units of production do they actually generate for me? That's marginal product. It's just quantity. It has nothing to do with dollars. It's just how much are you producing? Okay, so in this case, when we hire the first worker, we were producing 0 units, right, with no laborers. But once we got that first worker, we have a quantity of 10. So the marginal product of that first worker is just 10. With the second worker, our quantity goes up to 15. So we know that the first worker produced 10, the second worker, it goes to 15. So the added number of units was 5. The marginal product of that second worker is 5 units. For the third worker, it goes up to 18 from 15, so it would be 3. So that's marginal product. Pretty easy, right? We're just finding the change in quantity, the marginal change. Marginal revenue product is actually not too much of a leap from marginal product, right? The only thing we're adding in there is that R, revenue. And as you know, revenue is measured in dollars. So we need to make sure we find a way to include those dollars. In this case, it's simply taking the number of units and multiplying by the price that you're given. So if I know that each unit is being sold for $1 as the market price tells us, then I can calculate that the marginal revenue product of this first worker who had a marginal product of 10, and we sell each of those 10 units for $1, their MRP or marginal revenue product is going to be $10. For the second worker, they added 5 units times the $1, multiplied by the $1 we can sell each unit for in the market. The marginal revenue product of that second worker is $5. And finally, as you guessed, probably in your head just now, the third worker produces 3 units. We can sell each one for $1, so the marginal revenue product of the third worker is $3. Now, here's where it gets a little interesting, because this marginal factor cost in this case is going to be pretty easy. And here's why. We're hiring each worker for $5, right? It doesn't tell us that we have to offer the second worker more or the third worker more to get them to come work for us. We're paying each one the same amount. So the marginal factor cost in this particular market, as given with the information we have, is going to be a consistent $5. It's just what we're paying marginally to hire each additional worker. Now, the final takeaway from today, as we're using this information and thinking about how we can apply this stuff here, notice how the first worker, they pay for themselves, right? They produce 10 units, $10 worth of goods, and we only pay $5 to hire that first worker. So we made out as a firm, right? I benefited more than what I gave up. 10 is greater than 5. So as a firm, if I'm the one hiring that first worker, I win this round. Second worker barely covers their cost, right? They produce 5 units, which gives us $5, but they also cost $5 for us to hire them. So in this case, we would still hire, right? We would still hire that second worker because we want that productivity, and they did pay for themselves. And remember, built into all of our structure is all of our opportunity costs and things like that. So we are covering the cost of hiring that worker. Really what this is satisfying is the marginal principle, right? And I'm going to put a star here because we should stop at that second worker. We should only hire 2 workers. This is fulfilling our marginal principle, because the marginal benefit, MRP, is equal to the marginal cost of hiring that worker. Now, this final unit of labor, the third worker, only produces an extra 3 units, and that's only going to give us $3. So that third worker is not paying for themselves, right? They did not generate enough productivity to cover the marginal factor cost of hiring that worker. So we are not going to hire worker number 3. And if we do, and they generate these results, then we might have to part ways with that particular employee. But this is all based on marginal analysis. It all comes back to the marginal principle. Even as we move from product markets to factor markets, it's sort of that same guiding force, right? So you can use this chart to work through those 3 levels today. It's really just about calculating MP, MRP, and MFC. You don't have to do any of this balancing. You don't really have to apply the marginal principle today, but it's just kind of giving you a little peek into how we will be applying these numbers as we move forward. But that's it for section 5.1 today. Obviously, reach out if there are any questions that come up on those levels, and you have unlimited attempts. So feel free to work through those risk-free and take a shot in the dark. And if it's not the right answer, that's okay. Learn from it. Okay. And if you can't figure out where we went wrong, that's why I'm here. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me, whether it's through email or if you need to set up a Zoom call just to explain this stuff a little bit more. We can certainly do that. And there will be opportunities for group Zoom reviews as well as we move forward. So go ahead and dive into those practice levels and reach out with any questions. All right. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We will continue this next time. Thanks. See ya.